Hey everyone, welcome to the Backcountry Bike Repair video series.
I'm Kurt Refsnider. This is Kait Boyle. We're the Industry 9 Pivot Pro Backcountry team.
And collectively, we have over 30 years of backcountry riding and bikepacking experience. And with that goes all the different mechanicals that we've encountered, from racing, ultra races, and mountain bikes to bikepacking around the world on self-designed expeditions to teaching and leading the first ever college bikepacking course a few different years in a row. And in this series, we're going to take you through how to develop the skills and troubleshoot all these different mechanicals that can happen out in the field in the backcountry.
This series is going to be 12 episodes long this year, stretching from now until December. And we have to thank the Radavist and Wolftooth components for making this possible.
So when you think about what is the backcountry, when we're thinking about this, we're just thinking about mechanicals that happen a few miles from a trailhead, out of cell service, basically anything that would be inconvenient to walk yourself out or get picked up. And that could be pretty close to home, but you just need to be able to fix your bike to get home to the total other side of the world, deep in a remote, wild place where you do have to be able to fix your bike to get out.
And the skills that we're going to teach you also are going to be completely applicable to literally working on your bike at home in your living room, your workshop or garage, or wherever it might be. And so just because they're skills that are relevant to the backcountry doesn't mean they're not going to be invaluable to know for bike repair anywhere.
And so the first step in being ready to fix your bike in the backcountry or just out on a ride is to head out on your ride with a bike that is less likely to have a mechanical. And so before we even load up our bike with our stuff for a day ride or a multi-day ride, we want to check our bike and make sure that it's ready for being ridden and is less likely to develop a mechanical when out there. So we're going to take you through the ABCDs of a bike check that you can do at home in your garage, at the trailhead, preferably at home, or you could have your local bike shop do for you.
Yep. And this is also stuff if you're headed out on a multi-day ride, bikepacking, touring, whatever it might be. This is the kind of thing that you might consider doing daily, or at least do the basics of this daily to make sure that you keep up on any problems that could arise so that you catch them, hopefully before they actually turn into something big.
So let's get into the ABCDs of a bike check.
This is the system that we devised to try to remember all the different parts of what we need to go through in this pre-ride check. And in brief, A, air, that's tires and wheels. B, brakes, bolts, and bearings. C is cables and cracks, so this is basically just a general inspection. D is everything drivetrain. And S, the ABCDs, S is suspension and saddle, which includes dropper.
So air, we're thinking about tire pressure, preventing flats, and the integrity of our wheels. So first, setting off with tire pressure that you need adjusted for the load that you're carrying. One thing I want to do when I do this is make sure that my valve stem is letting out and taking air smoothly. They can get clogged with sealant sometimes or bent. It's a very simple mechanical to prevent by having a functioning valve stem. I'm also making sure that all of my spokes are intact. There aren't any broken spokes or there's any significant play in them. And of course, with this, when I'm heading out, I just want to make sure I don't have a flat to start with. Like my tires are holding air overnight and there isn't a slow leak that's happening that I would end up needing to fix in the field.
Bearings. Basically, anything on the bike that spins has bearings in it. And we want to make sure that those bearings are still moving smoothly and don't have any play in them. Either of those, if they're not moving smoothly, that can cause problems down the road. And if there's play in them, then that can damage other things on a big ride. So start with the easy one, wheels. You can just spin them make sure things spin smoothly and that you don't hear any kind of like rumbling or dry sound coming from the bearings in the hubs. Rear wheel, same thing. You'll hear the ratchet in the free hub driver making some noise like that. That's good. And also want to make sure there's some bearings in here. You can move this, try to move the cassette back and forth like this, and make sure that there's no play in the bearings that are in there. You've also got bearings down in the derailleur pulleys here, and these are ones that I've had wear out routinely over the years on long rides, and so making sure that things spin, and again, that there's not too much extra play. There should be a little bit of play in these, but you don't want a ton. And again, you don't want it to feel crunchy or rough when you spin either of these. And so if you get the chain out of the way, you can do that. There's also bearings down in the bottom bracket, which is in between the two crank arms here in the frame. And the easiest way to test that is pull the derailleur forward, drop the chain off, and spin that around. This should spin smoothly. There shouldn't be any play side to side in here, and there shouldn't be any grinding or anything like that in those bearings. And pedals also have bearings in there. You want those to spin well and not have any side-to-side play again. And then the last place most bikes is up in the headset. There's a couple bearings in here. And to test these, you want to be able to spin the bars and have them move freely, not feel any resistance in there. And then if you lock your front brake and just hold that and rock the bike front to back, if you hear any knocking or feel any play in here, that means that the headset bearings are loose and need to be adjusted a little bit. That's something that you definitely don't want to leave on a big ride with any kind of play in there. So B's, that was brakes, bearings, and then bolts is the last one. This basically is any place there is a bolt on your bike. You want to just check the snugness of that and make sure that it's tight enough. Everything technically has a torque spec. If you happen to have a torque wrench, that's a good way to be really safe about it. Otherwise, just make sure nothing is loose on all of these bolts. Check all of the stem bolts in here, axle bolts, brake caliper bolts in here, rotor bolts. It's so common on big rides for things that aren't tight to slowly loosen up along the way. Another one you might not think of because it's not on the bike, if you're on clipless pedals, the two bolts that hold your cleat onto the underside of your shoe, those can loosen up over time, so check those also.
C is for clean cables and cracks. And so before heading out on a trip, taking the time to clean your bike thoroughly will give you an opportunity to really inspect it in anywhere and find any lurking cracks in either the wheels or the frame, the handlebars, the saddle rails, down in the bottom of the bike in places that really collect dust and dirt and grime. That cleaning process is the best way to inspect your bike for any cracks. The cables and housing, if you have hydraulic brakes, you're looking to make sure there aren't any leaks in the lines. You're checking cables and housing to make sure there aren't any creases or pinched places where they come out of the frame or where they're attached to the frame, moving from the handlebars down onto the bike. If you're bike packing or have any bags attached to your bike, making sure that those bags aren't pinching the cables and housing in any way, that everything's still functioning. Of course, that the length is right, that it won't get caught in anything. Down by the derailleur, making sure that the ferrule here, which is attached to the end of the housing, is in the derailleur and not broken. And then that the cable that isn't frayed in any places, and that the end cap is on and secure.
D is for drivetrain. And drivetrain on a bike is the entire part that makes the bike move forward when you pedal. So that includes chainring, cassette, chain, derailleur, shifter. Maybe you have two derailleurs on your bike. depending on the style. And this has a lot of moving parts, a lot of things that can wear out, and a lot of things that need kind of careful adjustment to work smoothly. So this is one that also, if something goes wrong with the chain, if it shifts into your spokes, like that's the kind of issue that can turn into something quite big when you're out on the trail, and damaging to multiple parts of the bike. So you can easily go through all of this if you put the bike up in a repair stand. Some of it, if you don't have a repair stand, is easier to assess actually on a just little test ride around the neighborhood, and work through everything. But let's start with the chain. You want to make sure before leaving on a big trip that your chain isn't overly worn, and same thing with the chainring and the cassette on here. If you happen to have a chain checking tool, this is a really quick thing to do. Bike shops also usually check for free if you just hop in and ask them to check the condition on there. But check this one. Oop, that actually dropped in there. So this chain is somewhat worn. Check the other side. That one doesn't drop in, so this isn't in dire need of replacement yet, but soon. So this would be fine to head out on, a big day ride. If I was going to go bike packing, I would probably replace this one before leaving. If your bike has been shifting fairly well and your chain isn't completely worn out, odds are your chainring and cassette are in decent condition. If you do notice any kind of grinding sensation coming from up here when you're pedaling, or you see the chain bouncing with continuous pedal stroke, then the chainring might need to be replaced. Cassette also. Usually if you have a really worn chain, the cassette will be quite worn out also, and you have to replace them together. So that's an assessment that a bike shop can usually make at the same time. The other thing to check with the chain is to make sure that every one of these little pivots in here, in between the links, is moving smoothly. And so the easiest way to do that, make sure none of them are stiff and refusing to flex the way they're supposed to, is pedal the bike backwards and just watch right here to make sure that there's never a little hitch that catches the derailleur and pops it forward a tiny bit as you pedal through. And this is all moving nice and smoothly, so nothing there is concerning that I see. So chain on this bike, good for now. Shifting is something to work through either, again, in a repair stand or on a test ride. Go single gear at a time and just see how everything, and you want them all to move smoothly one to the next, not jumping multiple ones at once. We'll talk in a future episode about just how you go through the adjustment to fix this if it's not working well. So that looks good to me. Another really important thing to check is to make sure that the chain can't shift all the way over and into the spokes here. This is something that happens so commonly on improperly adjusted derailleurs, and it can jam the chain down in here and result in a bunch of broken spokes if you don't check this. And so this is one, it's easiest to do in a repair stand, but you literally just push the derailleur all the way up, and you can do it kind of violently so that it goes to where the farthest end of its motion, and you don't want the chain to be able to pop over the backside. If it does, you need to adjust the limit screws here. We'll talk about that in a future episode also.
S is for suspension and saddle, basically anything that squishes. For suspension, you just want to take the time to set your suspension up correctly at home before you head out. If you add weight, whether it's in bike packing bags or just a heavy day ride setup, adjust the sag correctly for the added weight. With your dropper, you just want to make sure that it works, that it drops and comes back up, especially if you add a seat bag, that it's still working properly, and that you have the clearance to not bottom it out when you go through your travel and your rear suspension, or even if you have a hardtail, just that it doesn't hit the saddle when the bag moves, which even when they're tight, they all do. And one last thing just to make sure that you do is that you're starting with clean seals on your dropper and anywhere that you have suspension on your bike.
So that was a lot. We're going to spend the next 11 episodes going through basically each of those parts of the bike we talked about, and how to deal with each of those if something goes wrong with it while you're deep in the backcountry.
And to kick things off in the next episode, we're going to start with what we carry on our bike and on our person, with between spare parts and tools, why and where we put them to fix any of these mechanicals in the field.
And if you have any questions, comments, leave them below, and we'll try to follow up with those.
Thanks.